guys, welcome to the latest episode of this unbelievable life. I am so excited to bring some family on today. My cousin Kristine and her husband Brian. Brian is one of the most amazing athletes that I know personally, and I cannot wait for him to tell his story. But a little bit of background. Brian and Kristine Toone have been enjoying life together for 20 years and looking forward to many more adventures together. Brian teaches computer science as a professor at Stanford University. Kristine works at IBM as an offering manager for online database hosting. They have one kiddo finishing up her first year in college, and that would be Annalise, and another finishing up his junior year in high school. And as you can tell, Kristine and I grew up together, and our kiddos are right about the same age. Brian and Kristine have traveled the country many times for Brian's bike races. And I say Brian and Kristine, but really it's the whole family. Their most recent venture is, as a family, was driving to Banff, and I'm hoping I pronounced that correct, but Banff, Canada, to the start of the Tour Divide mountain bike race, a 2,175-mile race following the Rocky Mountains down to the border of Mexico in Antelope Wells, New Mexico. Guys, take it away.
Well, listen, I love that Brian wrote that intro, and I love that he referenced the most recent one in Banff, because that's probably been my favorite location he's gotten to ride his bike in. And my biggest, yes, my quickest yes, when he said, hey, I want to do this. And I was like, yes, we're going to the start. Thank you very much. So it's beautiful. It's in the mountains, and I highly recommend people go visit there if they can. So Brian and I are going to ask each other some questions to kind of summarize our story, his story, our story together. So, because it takes two people to have one crazy person riding all these miles.
Right, absolutely.
So, Brian, give me a quick highlight summary of your ultra cycling adventures. Because listen, he goes on adventures on a weekend, but we're gonna focus on some of the ultra cycling adventures today.
Sure. Yeah, so Nikki mentioned the Tour Divide, so that is our most recent adventure, and we did that this past summer. And prior to that, I had done Race Across America twice.
So what's the difference between those two?
So with Tour Divide, it's you're on your own, you're very isolated because it follows the Rocky Mountains. So you're not on any roads. Well, you're on some dirt roads, some trails, and a lot of national forest you're going through. And so you're really on your own, and it's a logistical challenge too, trying to find gas stations, places. Where can I resupply? Where can I make it? Or how far can I make it with the water, food that I have?
And camping?
And yes, where can I sleep? Everything. So on the Tour Divide, I ended up sleeping in a cave at one point, and in a post office, and in a vault toilet.
That was, he texted me about that one, yeah. And he was like,
that was actually a really good.
He was so desperate. He was like, I'm so glad I found some place to stay warm this week.
It poured down rain. It was an unusual weather year. We had a ton of rain that turned into snow. I think it dumped almost a foot of snow early, right there at where we were crossing over from Canada into Montana, back into the U.S. They had a very late season. This was June 15th. So on June 15th, they had about a foot of snow that fell on us, and it was a mess. But that was pretty much the theme for the whole race. It just stayed wet. And so that vault toilet was pouring down rain. I'm like,
so you didn't take a tent, though?
I did not take a tent.
Why?
Take a tent. I was hoping to be one of the I was hoping to win. I mean, it is a race, so I was definitely aiming to try and win it. And the really fast guys, they just don't. They look for those kinds of shelters. that you can find along the way, just to save weight, so you're not carrying the weight of a tent.
Because you're not necessarily sleeping from like 9 p.m. to 9 a.m.
Right. The second to last day, way down in north of Silver City, New Mexico, I went through the Gila National Forest, and it was pouring down rain again, thunderstorms, raining, and it was about 100 miles of no shelter. And I was trying to do that overnight because I was trying to make up some time. And so I was trying to do that overnight, and I got super sleepy. I was like, I've got to find some place to sleep. And so I ended up finding three different, so over the night, there was 3 different, basically these big cedar pine trees that have a little bit more, I mean, they're still pine trees, but they have a little bit more, bushy leaf type covering. And so I was able to get a little bit out of the rain, for I think 30 minutes the first time, just maybe not even fully asleep the second time, and then maybe another 30 minutes that third time. And I woke up so cold, and this is New Mexico, almost July. I mean, this was by the end of June now. And I'm like, how am I freezing cold in New Mexico near the end of June? It was a very weird weather year, for sure. So yeah, that's kind of the Tour Divide. And then the race ended up being 2,000, it was actually closer to 3,000 miles, 2,700 miles. And the afterwards I rode home. So from New Mexico to get home to Alabama, you've got to cross New Mexico, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and then Alabama. And then by now it's the beginning of July. So this is Texas in the summer. And it ended up being, I ended up just riding at night most of the time because it was just way too hot during the day.
So he pitched this to me. I, of course, wanted to go to Canada, to Banff, which is kind of like Breckenridge. So gorgeous. I was like, yes, I'm all in. Kids, we're going to take a trip to Canada. Fantastic. Greatest road trip of our family life. But then I didn't really want to go to the middle of nowhere, New Mexico border to get him 2 weeks later. I mean, I didn't really have the time or the care. I was like, and he could have gotten a train. He could have gotten a train, but he was like, I can ride. It'll be fine. I can ride home. I'll finish the race and get in a hotel, and then I'm going to do this ride through Texas. And Uvalde, the shooting had just happened, and he wanted to ride through there and just see the memorial stuff. And so I was like, okay, that's fine. You could get a train at any point along this route, pretty much.
Yep.
Home.
Yep.
So when we came back from Canada, we left him at the start. He started the race. We cheered him on. And then we came back through the middle of nowhere, Canada, through a border patrol location. So here's how our border crossings differed. Okay. Brian was also in the middle of nowhere, but we crossed in the middle of nowhere, North Dakota. We pulled up to the border. They said, hand us your passport. So I had Annalise, 17. I had Josiah, 15, and me. I handed them 3 passports. And they said, how many of you are? There's 3 of us. And she said, where are you going? I said, well, we're going home to Alabama. Where are you coming from? I said, well, we were in Banff. And she said, what are you doing there? This is where I'm an American citizen coming back into the US. I did not really think it was going to be interrogated quite so harshly. And what were you doing? I said, well, my husband was doing a bike race. And then she shook her head and was like, well, where's your husband? He's doing the bike race. But I mean, and she was like, where's the bike race going? And I was like, well, it's going from Banff down to New Mexico to the Mexican border. It's what? It's going to Mexico? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, and you're not going to go pick him up? And I was like, no. I was like, there's trains. And she looked so confused. She's like, why is there a bike on the back of your car? And I was like, well, that's my son's bike. And at this point, she was like, okay, you can go.
And my crossing,
I was like, I know nobody understands my life. It's complicated.
my crossing was there was nobody there. So I mean, like the border patrol guy was there, but there was no waiting. So I just rode up to it, and as I'm getting close, he's like, "Hi, Brian." and it turns out they do this race every year, and so they know that you're going to have all these people coming, and it's actually a worldwide race. So I'd say less than half, probably under half of the racers are American, and then there's a bunch of Canadians, and then there's also a bunch of people from Europe. I mean, all over the world, really, probably mostly from Europe, but that come do this race, which makes it a logistical. The border's going to be getting all these people from all over the world coming, so they know, and they're tracking the race, and they can see based on our satellite trackers who's coming, and so that's how he knew it was me coming.
So I got interrogated, and he got like greeted with like a single man welcoming committee by name. So
yeah, and I had hilarious. I had to hand him my passport, and all he did was like literally looked at it and handed it right back to me, and was like, "All right, bye."
I was afraid my agent was going to ask to look in the trunk to see if his body was there or something. Okay, so that was the Tour Divide. You mentioned this thing called the Race Across America.
Yes, very vastly different, because that one is all on roads, and it's supported. So Kristine and a bunch of my friends from here in Birmingham played a big role in that. They were all on the crew that were in a car that followed behind me the whole way. And so, I mean, it's completely different.
So does that take you like 30 days?
Oh, no. So that race is about 400 miles longer, so just over 3,000 miles. And it took me 8 days less. So because you could basically just ride constantly and sleep on the side of the road for an hour, get back on the bike and ride some more, or a hotel. We had booked some hotels too, and do quick sleep and then let the crew sleep.
So what was your miles per hour average? And this was all road cycling.
All road. Yep.
So what was your miles per hour average for one or both of the two Race Across Americas on the road?
So I think it was interesting. On the first year, my overall average speed, because that does include sleeping, it ends up being about 12 miles an hour, I think. But that includes all the time that you're stopped sleeping. And but the rolling speed, so when you were moved, it was actually 17 miles an hour in 2015. But in 2017, when we did it again, it was a mile an hour slower. But overall, I was nearly like 18 hours faster, I think, because I didn't sleep as much, and we didn't waste as much time, like where I just didn't want to be on the bike. I would think of everything I could possibly think of to sit on the side of the road for a little bit longer in 2015. Whereas in 2017, I kind of knew a little bit more about how my body would feel and things to expect. And I didn't have as many problems with my feet. In 2015, I had some huge problems with my feet less than halfway into the race. And that just made riding miserable. Whereas in 2017, we had, different shoes and different preparation, and that one went much smoother. And I enjoyed that one. I mean, both races were great and both crews were great, but the 2017, with that experience from having done it once before, just made the 2017 one so much more enjoyable and faster.
I do have to say, in the hindsight, like the first week or two after all of these races, he is often in I will never do this again, just like many of us feel about having kids. And then the further away you get, you think, well, that wasn't so bad. What a great sense of accomplishment. I should do that again.
Right. This is true. This is true.
Okay. Do you have any questions?
Sure. What's it like being on the other side?
That's a good question. So Brian rides a lot. It's funny. We were at a car dealership the other day looking at cars, and he rode up, and they asked how many miles a week he rode. The guy was like 40. Isn't that what he said? He said something.
Yes.
And Brian was like, no, like 400. And the guy like didn't even know how to process that. So he commutes by bike to work and does a lot of riding just around before and after work, and then some long rides on the weekend. Just an ultracycle, like the life of an ultracyclist is that if we're going somewhere, like we're going to a beach trip in Savannah, Brian will say, hey, can I leave 2 days ahead of time so I can ride there? Or I say, hey, we're going up to Indiana to see my family for Thanksgiving. And he says, oh, I have always wanted to ride from Alabama, where we live.
That was still such an incredible that adventure. That was 2016. That was
where
incredible.
Nikki lives, all the way except past where Nikki lives, because he had to go to the border of Michigan because he had to feel like he completed the state of Indiana top to bottom.
Right.
So there are always these quirks of I just assume that he's going to prefer to ride somewhere and throw the bike in the car at some point. And you know, it is what it is. I kind of look at it as a lot of wives have husbands with different, I'm not going to say obsessions. People might be saying that in their mind. That's fine. Or deep passions, whether it's motorcycles or home improvement projects or golf. This is my husband's, and yes, it's got its own quirks. But then again, I do watch TV shows like people climbing Mount Everest and go, well, I'm super glad that that's not my husband. So tell us your most memorable moment. Like, I know you could tell us 47 moments from the Tour Divide, because you really did love that experience. Tell us your most memorable moment on the Tour Divide.
The Tour Divide. So like from a positive, the positive side on Tour Divide was early on, those first days in Canada, just in those Rocky Mountains. It was just amazing.
The Canadian Rockies,
they're so sharp, and
they're really rugged,
and they're right there. It's not like I rode right through the Colorado Rockies as well, but the mountains in Colorado are actually bigger, which means they're farther out too, whereas the Canadian Rockies are just really sharp and right there. And so it was just, I mean, it was hundreds of miles of that. I mean, at some point I'm like, well, I guess I can't take any more pictures. I mean, I think I ended up taking like 1,500 pictures on the ride, just all with my cell phone. But I mean, that was a positive experience. So the other one, oh yes, we slept in an oil shed. So that was another place I slept. In Wyoming, one of the most isolated parts of the race is actually Wyoming, where you go through what they call the Great Basin, which is where the Continental Divide splits. So the Rocky Mountain Continental Divide splits the country in half. You know, the water on the west side goes to the Pacific, water on the east side goes to the Gulf or Atlantic. But in Wyoming, there's this big section where the divide itself splits and comes around, and you're left with this huge area called the Great Basin that has no natural water outlet, and it's basically a high desert. And there's no services. So there's 100 miles. There's nothing. Like, I mean, there's 100 miles between. You don't even. You start in basically almost a ghost town. You start when you're crossing that section. You start in this ghost town area. I mean, there's people that live there, but it's a very historic old town. Tiny. I mean, it's like straight out of the Old West. And you go from there to a Love's truck stop 100 miles later that is only there because I-80 is crossing the Great Basin right there. And so there's a tiny little town around this truck stop called Wamsutter, and and that's it. So you have no resupply for that 100-mile stretch. And the thing about our weather this year wasn't just the overall rain. You also had the monsoon season. So the monsoon season had started, and so that's where these desert areas will get these torrential rains, which turns everything to what everybody calls peanut butter mud. And so we are riding, and I say we because I had connected that in itself is a hilarious story. But prior to the start of this section, 4 of us had arrived in the town before at the same time, and we were all wanting to end there. I was actually way ahead of them, but I had gone to the next town. The next town had one place to sleep, and they wouldn't let me sleep there. So I had to bike all the way back. I had to bike 11 miles back to the previous town.
Hey, listen, I just have to interject here that there's nothing more infuriating to a cyclist than having to bike backwards on something that they have already ridden.
That you already, because I've already ridden 11 miles this way. Now I've got to ride 11 miles back, and the next day I have to ride those same 11 miles again.
He had to be on the phone with me for this. Luckily there was service, and he was like, I need to stay on the phone with you. I am so demoralized.
Yeah, I'm like, I cannot ride this stretch by myself without talking to you right now, because I will just not do it. So anyway, so I made it back into town as the others were arriving. And one of the actually the lead woman in the race was one of the people coming in. She's from Belgium, and she was just dying laughing. She's like, we're the worst racers ever, because she was just like, she couldn't believe she was in the lead, because she didn't feel like she was riding fast, although she was fast. And she's like, and you're riding the wrong way. And I'm like, yep, I agree. And I said, it gets better. I'm going to keep going the wrong way so that I can hit 250 miles for the day. I'm not going to stop at 249 miles. Anyway, so I did. I rode another half mile and then another half mile back to make it all the way up to 250 miles for the day.
Cyclists are a little obsessed with numbers.
Yes, but anyway, so
y'all got up the next morning.
We all got up. We were staying in different places. I think I was the only one at the Rabbit Inn or whatever it was called. I was the only one there, and I got up. I thought I'm gonna leave way before them, but I was up at like 4:30. And this guy, Steve Large from near Birmingham, England. We live here in Birmingham, Alabama, but he riding faster than me, so he ended up riding up, catching me as we're going that 11-mile stretch. And I'm like, oh, this is the best thing ever. And I told him the whole story. I was like, I'm so glad you are here right now. We can ride this stretch together, these 11 miles, because again, I've already ridden this twice. This is my 3rd time riding these 11 miles. And so we do that. And Zoe, the shouted a lot. She ended up catching us not long after. She was faster than both of us for sure. And she caught us, passed us, and then we caught back up to her when she was stopping for lunch at that ghost town. And so she was only like maybe 10 minutes ahead of us. So she was in her lunch already, and we got our lunch, and then we saw her, she's kind of going fast and everything. And the primary reason was we had a massive tailwind. And the rule is, if you're in the Great Basin and you have a tailwind, you just don't stop, because that section is notorious for massive headwinds that make it practically impossible to ride. I mean, you're just not going anywhere. And we had a nice tailwind. And so she finished up. So we were like scrambling and getting all done so we could kind of leave together. She took off first. this is how windy it was, though, and thankfully it was a tailwind. So we had our bikes outside. She's gone by this point. Steve is getting his bike, and I'm getting my bike, getting all the stuff back on the bike, and my helmet blows off the bike, and my gloves, the mittens that I had bought, fell out of the helmet, and I kid you not, they were like gone. So I ended up running after them like probably 3 or 4 blocks. That's not an exaggeration. Way down the road, and I mean, this is like a 30-mile-an-hour wind, and got them, and then came back, and by that point Steve's gone, so I'm riding and I'm going now, and I've got 100 miles to this Love's. I'm like, okay, next stop, 100 miles, Love's, and I am like a little bit nervous about it, and you get out there, and I'm probably in there about 10 miles, and I could see Steve every now and then up ahead. I could see him, and I hadn't seen anything. And this is about 10 miles now. Nothing. I mean, there was just basically this really high desert. And it started to hit on me. It was like, if Steve leaves, he's gone. There's nobody. So I just started riding very fast, and I caught up to him. Just wasn't that long. It was probably a couple miles. It probably only took me a couple miles. I caught up to him and said, "Okay, I'm gonna ride with you." So we can be together. And right about that time, we noticed the thunderstorms. So there was these big thunderstorms forming, and you've got this wide open sky, so you can kind of see, and you're gauging, okay, which way is that moving? Which way is our route moving? And then we were like, oh no, yeah, that's coming for us. And so we are riding. We're both starting to really ride fast. And we're like, where's Zoe? And turns out she had observed all of this as well with the storm. And she had been riding like crazy too, like super fast. And the storm is almost on us. And I'm like looking off to the left. And I had seen like a oil well or something. I was like, look at that, off to the left. And Steve's like, there's Zoe. And he's looking off to the right. And I turn, and there's this massive like shed in the middle. That's the first thing we had seen. That the oil well I saw, that's why I was looking at that oil well on the left. It was like, oh my gosh, it's something. There's actually something there. And this is probably 40 to 50 miles into this stretch now. The first thing I saw was that oil well. And then just off to the right was this big shed that had several large tractors in it. And the storm is about to hit us. And so we're like, well, let's see if anything's open. We can crawl inside or something. And sure enough, it wasn't locked, so we could just crawl inside. And we ended up sleeping there. So the three of us ended up just waiting out the storm. It wasn't super long, like maybe an hour. But then that turned everything to mud. Everything was just crazy mud. Steve stepped outside the shed, put his foot down, and then picked it up, and there's probably like an inch of mud on the bottom of his foot just from one step down. And so that's really hard to ride in. So we're like, let's just wait, and hopefully it'll dry out a bit because it is desert. And that's what we ended up doing. So that's probably one of the most memorable things. Was that time. That was an adventure for sure.
That's so funny. Just imagining when he first told me this story, he went into more details about what the shed was like, and it really did sound like something out of a cyclist adventure documentary crossed with a horror movie.
Yeah. I mean, I was
like, this sounds just straight out of it. Like there was a chainsaw massacre.
Well, I mean, there was a little bed set up, because what happens is if those oil workers are out there and one of these storms hits, they can't drive their trucks. They can't leave either, because it's you definitely can't drive in it. So yeah, it looked like they had that all set up, and this is still 50 miles from Wamsutter. All right, so tell everyone about our first ride together.
So of course, like most of us, I rode a bike a little bit growing up, but just a little bit. When Brian and I met, he invited me to go for a bike ride. But I didn't have a bike, but he happened to have 2 bikes, lucky me. So he's like, you can use my mountain bike, but you'll have to use my shoes because I have clip-in pedals. So no problem. He's on his road bike. I'm on his mountain bike. So we go for this fun ride in Texas and we get back and I'm all at Twitter. Like I'm like giddy for this guy that I kind of like. And it's just been this great ride. And like, we pull up to the building where we're going to stop and I hit the brakes and my feet are still clipped in. And so the bike tips over and I tip over with the bike and Brian reaches out.
I was trying to save her
to grab the bike.
And I ended up grabbing the bike and she fell off anyway. So I ended up saving the bike and she fell off.
Anyway, I sprained my wrist a little bit and he spent a couple days apologizing. And then finally I was like, okay, stop. Like he was like, I'll take you out for dinner. And finally I was like, dude, are you taking me out just because you feel bad or because you want to take me out? Because I'm over your like feeling bad. So that was one of our first dates. And how we ride together now. We are both a part of the local, we have an Alabama cycling association. And so when Josiah started in 6th grade, Brian decided he would onboard as a coach with them. And later in the season, Annalise decided she would ride with the team as well. And by the end of the season, I decided I needed a mountain bike because finally, as most people listening know, if you have kids, your family life goes all various directions. But all of a sudden, we were going to have this one thing where we were all going to practice on Sunday afternoon as a family. And it was great. So that was 5 years ago, 6 years ago.
Right, huh?
I was in 6th grade and he's in 11th grade now. So we're on our 6th year of that. And now I am the head coach and the team director of our team. Annalise likes to call me the emotional support coach. I'm an emotional support coach. I'm not the greatest cycling coach, but I'm an A+.
You are.
A+ emotional support coach.
Absolutely.
So he's still coaching with the guys, and Josiah is he is one of the top riders on our team now. And Annalise rides her bike every now and then at college. I mean, she doesn't have it at college, but when she comes home. So okay, back to your ultra things. Let me look at our time here. Let's see what we got.
It says it in the corner.
Okay. We've got just a little bit less. Let's how do you keep riding so long? Like you talk about this riding for like days, like in the Race Across America, you would ride for 21 hours and you would sleep for 3. And then the Tour Divide, sometimes you rode for more than 24 hours at a time. How do you keep pedaling? Now look at the clock right there.
Yeah.
How do you keep pedaling?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a part of it is definitely I'm very goal oriented. So the make it to the end, no matter what, doing everything I can to make it to the end. And so part of that is you got to ride your bike. So that's definitely a huge motivator. But I mean, I do in general, it's especially, I mean, in the races, but even around town, I mean, I could ride to work and back in I think it's about 7 miles each way. But I mean, a typical day will be 40 to 50 miles long. So, I mean, one, I do like to ride the bike. I just like it, the exercise and everything. But also I'm always finding things. It's always just an adventure. It's always just seeing things. Like right now it's the pollen, which thankfully it's not the kind that I'm super allergic to yet. That's another month or so. But it's just incredible to see these vistas of just this yellowish, it's like you're in some sort of movie or something where this yellow tint over everything. So I mean, that's just as an example. So that helps motivate a lot.
So you're always looking for the adventure.
Yeah.
And I was gonna say, I think Nikki could echo this too. sometimes it really is just mind over matter. You just keep moving your legs, right, Nikki? Like, I know you've done a marathon. I've done a marathon. I know that in the scope of things, a marathon isn't riding across America or riding from Canada to Mexico, but I really think having a goal, you can almost always keep your body moving. There's such a mental part of it, just to keep your body moving and having a goal. So I'm gonna hand it over to Nikki now. Is that all right?
Yep. Yeah.
Well, with that all said, I just think what you have done and as a family have done is just absolutely incredible. And you talk about the mental, I think it's a mental strength. You have to have that wherewithal and that mental strength to put one foot in front of the other or to pedal that much farther. And you have that in spades. And I just can't tell you how impressed I am. And we talk about this unbelievable life. You, sir, have an unbelievable life. I have always loved watching your races when they satellite track you. I'm not jealous in any way, shape, or form because that's all you guys. But it's fun. It is definitely fun to watch, and for sure, I'll post some information, just to kind of recap this. But if anybody has any questions, they're more than welcome to reach out to me, and I'll get in touch with Brian and Kristine. But other than that, thank you all so much for listening, and I hope
Sure. Thanks.
blessed a wonderful day.